I'm Shirley Appleman from Bellwether's Academic and Program Strategy team. This is the latest in our video series spotlighting leaders across the country who found creative solutions to address teacher staffing challenges. Today, we're talking with Tony Munoz, Chief Talent Officer at YesPrep. Tony joined YesPrep in 2020, so he is well aware of the staffing challenges that were exacerbated by the COVID pandemic. Before we get into our conversation, I want to make everyone watching knows that they can find even more ideas to help address staffing challenges in Bellwether's new toolkit, Creativity from Necessity. And the little QR code is below. So with that, I would love to transition to start interviewing Tony. And before we get started on your approach, we would love if we can get started with just a high-level explanation of what are J-1 visas for those of us who are not familiar with them.
Yeah, absolutely, Shirley. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to share some of the things that we're doing at YesPrep. The J-1 visa is a cultural exchange visa. And then under that J-1 umbrella is what we call the J-1 visa teacher program. And so that, specifically for that, it's for foreign teachers to come to the U.S. And teach at a U.S. school where they can learn, our methods of teaching, our curriculum, our culture. And then, the thought is those individuals could then go back to their home countries, right? And take some of the strategies that they've learned from their visit here in the U.S., which, by the way, the visa is good for up to 5 years, right? So the individual could stay in the U.S. for up to 5 years. And so the spirit of it is a cultural exchange. So obviously, they leave an imprint in terms of their work here with our students, bringing in their experience from their home countries, their culture from their home countries into our classrooms. But the spirit of it is an exchange where then they go back to their home countries, having learned some of our teaching methods, and then go and impact their countries.
Thank you for that explanation and for going into the value proposition for both the teachers who are flying in and joining us, as well as your schools. And speaking of your school, YesPrep has embraced the idea of recruiting J-1 visa teachers to work in its 25 school campuses across Texas. Can you talk us through what made YesPrep start going down this path? What were the first steps once you decided that this was a go?
No, yeah, absolutely. So I think for all of us in talent across all industries, but especially in education, we have seen the pandemic, even before the pandemic, right? We were seeing very low applicant pools, and very low application numbers coming in to fill our vacancies. And so the pandemic only made that worse. We saw at Yes a 30% reduction in the number of teacher applications that were coming in. So we could see that the pandemic was impacting our labor pool. And so we needed to start getting creative, right? We needed to cast a wider net of where we were going to go find the talent we needed here in Houston to staff our schools. And so we started thinking through what ideas were out there, what strategies could be implemented that would have an immediate impact, right? And so we were focused on, the short term, long term, but immediately we were looking for some quick results. And, the J-1 visa program was the strategy, I think, that got us the most return on investment because we were specifically focused on filling our hard to staff certification areas, which in Texas would be your math, science, your bilingual teachers, and your special education teachers. And so
in terms of what are those first couple of next steps you took once you were like, oh, this is it, this is a great idea? What did you do?
Yeah, the first thing I did was obviously the research, right? Now I knew there was an exchange program. I knew that, the U.S. is a destination place for a lot of international professionals. And so it was just trying to find out and educate myself on what the visa required and who would be, because obviously I'm not in some of these international countries. And so trying to figure out who were the major players in terms of, boots on the ground recruitment at some of these places where we were going to target getting these teachers from, right? And so so that was it, identifying, who had a history of doing this in other places in terms of internationally, right? From a recruiting standpoint, and then connecting with those people and then finding out, exactly like how many visas could we get, right? If there was a finite number or not. And so, once I did that research and I identified a couple of companies, it was more of a conversation with those companies, doing some background work, asking them for references of who, that they were working with, what school systems they were working with in the U.S., and then try to figure out, if I had relationships with any of those individuals to be able to call them and get the real deal on the experience of working with that recruiting company.
Beautiful. Um, Again, a lot of agility, a lot of nimbleness, a lot of initiative that you had to take to start a program from scratch. Let's talk a little bit more about the logistics and what have been some of the biggest challenges to implementing this strategy, and how have you addressed them so far?
Yeah, I think the first challenge, Shirley, is that and I didn't address this in my initial response to your earlier question, is we didn't pivot to this until February
Mm.
of 2022. So it's already the heat of the hiring season, right?
Yeah.
Um, and very late in implementing something like this, right? Because you're talking about bringing individuals from outside of the country, moving their entire lives to the United States, right? And so time was one of the biggest challenges for me in the first year,
Mhm.
um, and because the process you take, not just from vetting, right? Because that's first thing is, how are you going to vet the candidates in partnership with your recruitment company, and that takes time.
Mhm.
Once you decide who you are interested in to offer a role, um, they have to then go to their embassy and get an appointment to get a visa,
Mm.
and that could take 1 to 2 months, right? So time was working against me this past year, um, and so this year, obviously, we started way earlier. We have already identified the 30 teachers we are bringing on board, and those teachers are now at the point where they're requesting those appointments with their embassies, right? So,
Wow.
um, so that, the right timeline is really important. I would say that you would not want to start this process any later than, October, November of any given year if you're expecting them to be in your classrooms for the upcoming school year. Not saying that it can't be done if you're not on that timeline. Obviously, I did it.
Yeah.
We did it, but it was extremely difficult to do within a shortened timeline. Um, I think so that's one, right? The time that you have to
Yeah.
ramp up. I think the other challenge was acculturation, right? These teachers are not familiar with, for the most part, not familiar with the educational system of the United States, the curriculum, the culture of our classrooms, and so on top of the culture of just being a Texan,
Yes.
right? The acculturation of being a teacher in Texas, right?
Mhm.
And so we that was a huge challenge. And as soon as we identified individuals that we would be interested in, we started giving them information on our curriculum, videos on our teachers teaching in the classroom, and trying to get them as familiar as as early as possible before their arrival on what the expectations of a teacher and what our classrooms look like. The other thing we did, um, is prior to their arrival and even through their selection, I would say, is we asked in building our profile with our recruitment partner, we asked for prioritization of a few things in the profile. We look for folks who had experience, as an au pair, right, for example, or experience as an exchange student. Anything that would show us that this person had spent a significant amount of time in the United States, to give them an idea of how the culture works here, right? And so, doing that allowed us to, again, try to address that acculturation from the very beginning. I think the other challenge was, how do you support them when they come, right? Because these are individuals. This is not your person who's moving from, X city to your city, right? It is they're leaving their home country. There is only a certain amount of things that they can bring with them, right? Um, and so really supporting them once they are here on how to find an apartment, housing, how to furnish the housing, how to set up their utilities. So if you can think of all of those things that a normal person would do, they're just going to need help because they're coming from countries where the process to get those things looks vastly different, right? And so, everything from, banking, right, would be another issue. But the way we started solving around that is we started working with individuals that were familiar or knew how to work with employees with visas, right? Yeah. So, and so from that lens, right, of, hey, these individuals are on visas, what does that mean for how you find housing, utilities, banks, vehicles? Is how we tried to build a system of support that was familiar with their status.
In terms of outcomes, I'd love to shift there. Results and outcomes. How has the J1 program helped YesPrep with staffing challenges?
Yeah. Yes, and I think it's also important, Shirley, for me to mention, I do have experience with other visa programs, right? And so in particular, I'll speak to YesPrep's J1 program. One, we were able to fill 25 of our highest hard to staff areas, right? Mm-hmm. SPED, special education, math, bilingual, and science. And so I think that's a very important point right now, especially when you think of how the labor market has also impacted our sub pool. Mm-hmm. And so we don't have subs for the vacancies or the absences that teachers, are submitting at this time, right? It's very challenging for us to find subs. So when I think of these 25, I don't just think of 25 teachers, rather I multiply it by our student-to-teacher ratio of 20. Mm-hmm. So when I think of 25, I'm thinking there's at least 500 students now that have a highly qualified teacher in their classroom in these hard to staff areas, right? That's number one. Yes. What I have seen in my research has shown, and my research shows, right, that these international teachers, in particular, some of the places they're coming from, Philippines, Colombia, Spain, where the rigor of the university preparation for you to be a teacher is extremely high. What we've seen, or what research is showing, is that they actually outperform some of their U.S. counterparts. What our last, we do these benchmark testing, right? So our internal data right now is showing that's actually true here as well. And so it's fascinating because, I would not have thought of, that in the beginning, right? So even for my own learning, right? Um, that these are very highly professional, highly dedicated, and highly prepared people that are coming from these international communities to teach in the U.S. To just to give you an idea of the amount of, um, or I should say, how competitive it is. There were 5,000 applications that came in. We interviewed. Um, from there, they vetted them down, looking at our profile request. They vetted them down to 2,000. And then we then reviewed them even further and then interviewed about 200, 250, and then landed on 25.
Wow.
So the amount of vetting that went into, like, you're dealing with just the cream of the crop in terms of the candidate pool that we
Mm,
were looking at.
wow. It also sounds that there's plenty of supply in terms of international teachers, and obviously with really strong vetting, sounds like an amazing pool to tap into if we're struggling with staffing shortages. And back to your point around like the impact, I love how you multiplied your impact. Like you were able to hire 25 teachers. The impact again to your recruiting team is now that they don't have to worry about hiring those 25 spots here in the United States. And additionally, the impact to students, like now you're serving, you are fulfilling promises to families and to students that you were going to provide a high quality educator in those classrooms. So that's fantastic. One final question, and is what advice would you offer to other schools and system leaders watching this who are interested in recruiting J1 visa teachers or pursuing other creative solutions to staffing?
Yeah, I think with everything or any initiative that you're going to do regarding talent, right, does the idea or the initiative fit like your overall org values, right? Um, what are those org values and how does this, fit that, supplement that? And how does your org values kind of form the foundation of how you will operate with this, right? So, our org values, so that was my first question for myself, right? Is our organization supportive of this, right? Um, and once that was a green light, the next thing I had to think through, and I would advise anyone who's doing this is, do you have the systems in place for support,
Mm-hmm.
right? And how quickly can you build those systems and build that infrastructure for support for some of these teachers? Um, I think the other thing that I would say is you obviously have to have buy-in from your leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever's going to have a, um, a visiting international teacher on their campus needs to understand that they're getting a high quality teacher, but in exchange for that, they have to realize that that comes with some commitments on their part, that this person is going to have additional needs beyond your usual teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Some things that are very basic for us Americans are complete unknowns to some folks, and how we operate, whether that's within the school or outside of the school. So it's important that you do as much education and acculturation of your leaders who will have these folks in their schools as you would the candidates you're bringing in.
Mm-hmm.
So they have some baseline understanding culturally of what it is, what it means to be a Filipino teacher in the Philippines. What does it mean to be a teacher in Colombia? What does their day-to-day look like? What does a video of them teaching in their classroom look like? So that is very important because one, it just makes the onboarding smoother. And when issues arise, because they will, there is true partnership between the talent team, the campus leader, and then the teacher on how to best move forward.
Awesome. Thank you. I just to summarize that I heard making sure that it's this approach is aligned to your mission and vision and values, ensuring that we have the systems to implement a program like this, as well as the change management and the investment that we need for leaders throughout the organization, as well as the empathy. I think that's like the through line: empathy for international teachers coming to a new place, and keeping that top of mind as we move forward. So with that, Tony, I just wanted to thank you for this conversation. You can read more detailed case study that we wrote up on Yes Prep's approach in our toolkit, Creativity from Necessity. And you can also scan the QR code on the screen. Look for more videos soon spotlighting other leaders using creative approaches to recruit, hire, and retain the teachers their kids need most. Thank you.